Okay, with the success of Dress to Kill and Blowout, Brian De Palma signed a contract with Columbia Pictures to do 3 pictures. This is the first one. It is Body Double.
So now we have to ask the question, are you my body double or am I yours? We'll be good.
All right. Welcome, Patreons. Today we're going to talk about Brian De Palma's kind of a signature film, I'd say.
It's the most De Palma film I think we've watched so far.
Oh, yeah. He would agree. Yeah.
Welcome back to The Road to De Palma, episode 2 of our exclusive Patreon series of us as we ride through the films of Brian De Palma.
Yes, I think he's like a film lover's filmmaking kind of guy. If you like film, he's kind of the filmmaker for people who enjoy films.
What I've often said about it since we started reviewing De Palma films way back during season 2 of this show. He's basically, if you take a script by Hitchcock and you just run it through your gutter and then pull it out and dry it off, you're going to get a De Palma film. And that's not a slight. That's not a slight at all.
I know. I sometimes say things and people think that there's criticism. No, and just kind of like an observation. Like Brian De Palma is a student of Hitchcock, but he's also a consumer of what he is from the 80s and 70s of just let's get down and dirty the way things Hitchcock couldn't get away with.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah. So today's Body Double, and like I said, it's the first of his contract for Columbia Pictures. This is Columbia Pictures after they broke their. Remember I talked about in the last picture show. You could only make a movie. It was only about 90 minutes, no more. But after that, they relaxed the rules, so he's able to play around a little bit. Body Double is kind of the inspiration for 3 Hitchcock movies. You got Rear Window, a little bit of Vertigo with Vertigo, and then I would say you could probably play Psycho. Involved.
I think Psycho's in all of De Palma's films in some
Psycho,
form.
some form or the other.
Let's do a breakdown of the plot here. It's about struggling actor Jake Scully, who's out of work, out of his relationship, and has nowhere to stay. He accepts a house-sitting gig from another actor named Sam while he's out of town, and Jake immediately takes notice of a beautiful woman next door who spends her nights seductively dancing from her window.
Like clockwork.
As Jake becomes more enamored with the woman, he becomes convinced she's being stalked, so he stalks her himself to find the answers.
So one of the things I like about this movie is the aesthetic. It's like a Troy McClure apartment. It's like
the chemosphere.
The modern, ultra-modern sphere, all downtown Hollywood kind of apartment. It's carpeted, rotating bed. It is so 80s. You expect it like to be free cocaine in the bathroom on the,
The beautiful thing about the 80s, though, is that you see that and you're like, yeah, that's real. Like, I don't have to look it up. That's real. And I did look it up to make sure, but that's real.
And it's gaudy. It's gaudy, too. So, this is Brian De Palma. Actually, more like I would critique if you haven't seen After Hours from Martin Scorsese. I think you've seen that one. And that's Martin Scorsese in his own signature way of pure filmmaking fun presenting a film. I think this is kind of Brian De Palma's pure filmmaking fun making a film. He goes the insides of the filming process, a struggling actor, but it's kind of his fault. He gets claustrophobic. You have Dennis Franz playing the great director, Dennis Franz.
Yeah. Playing Brian De Palma.
Brian De Palma. And you have all the sets on fire, so you have a lot of things, all the chaotic process of being in Hollywood and, the film business.
Yeah.
But also you're using what's the signature of Alfred Hitchcock as your template to draw out this thing. Yeah. It's kind of the filmmaker's filmmaking kind of a thing.
Yeah,
I'm going to say this.
De Palma did that sometimes, like not with every one of his films, but you can tell it was almost like he made a promise to the devil. I'm going to do out of every 3 films is going to have some homage to like horror. Even though I rarely ever go all the way into horror. I'm going to give my little homages here and there. Yeah. And this is something where I think he said that during Dress to Kill there was a body double needed for Angie Dickinson.
Yes.
And he said that was kind of where the idea came from. Is this thing that he hadn't really conjured up before, but like talking about people who are afraid to show skin on film, so we get body doubles, and then kind of like how could I make that into a mistaken identity thing. And of course, this was also the film where he wanted to try and push the envelope as far as it would go. He tried to push the producers to do unsimulated sex scenes, and he tried to push the producers to do an X rating, and both of them were poo-pooed.
Kind of dabbled into the pornography industry, drawing from those actors and actresses, and kind of using the seedy world of that industry as well, that side of the industry, as well as kind of an inspiration for the story. And so, like, yeah, I'm an actor, I got to take jobs. But the beginning of the movie is kind of a horror movie. It's a very gaudy 80s horror movie.
Oh, I love it. It's got even the credits, like the opening credits where it's like the blood that drips away to white and stuff like that. I just love when De Palma isn't afraid to stick his toe into the horror genre.
Make
just
fun of
like,
horror, right?
Yeah, make fun of it,
Not
but
really-
also show appreciation for it too. You know, in the same way like the Tales from the Crypt show,
Or like they did in the
horror.
beginning of Blowout with the slasher.
Exactly,
movie. Yeah.
same way that way too. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is typical spied on De Palma, but I think the signature thing that what he really loves to do is the exploration of like large rooms, like he did Toledo Way with the train station. Here you have the mall. You have the playing acting of the mall of her. He's fixated on the woman. He's following her around. He thinks she's in danger, but the whole malls, and that's where Brian De Palma excels in these kind of play action of spaces.
Yeah. It's such an odd thing because it's an epic sequence, a very large scale sequence that occurs 30 minutes into the movie. It's the kind of sequence you feel like you're going to get near the end, you know? And so to have it pop up and to have it just keep going, and yet you never seem to lose interest in what's happening because he's just ever so slightly like turning the knob, just really pushing it a little bit at a time to make that tension well up inside you.
Well, he's stalking the woman, but then the stalker's stalking him. Stalking is that.
Yeah, who's really stalking who at that point?
Right, so you have actor Craig. What's on Nightmare on Elm Street? People should recognize him.
That's the only one of the two things I'd seen him in was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and the movie Schizoid, which is an 80s slasher
obscure.
movie. So
Very obscure. You know your horror movies, yes. Yeah, and then you have Greg Henry, who likes to play bad guys. He did the Point Blank remake, which is Payback with Mel Gibson. And
That's
he was in that movie. You had Melanie Griffin, who comes in late in the second act of the movie.
Yeah, I thought I had missed her while I was like when the movie was halfway done. I thought I had maybe missed her at one scene.
Right.
So I was like, I don't watch a ton of her movies, so like I was like, did I? Maybe she looks different than I remember.
Brian De Palma and her will go on to work with Bonfire of the Vanities, which would woo.
You can't win them all.
I can't win them all. And then you have Deborah Shelton. She is the woman that's doing the presentation. She doesn't mind being on display with the windows when she does her dance moves in front of the window.
Yep, dubbed over by actress Helen Schaefer. They didn't like her voice, so they dubbed it over for the film.
Right.
Which was kind of funny. Yeah, Greg Henry is the one that stood out to me because he's the kind of guy who, you know, he's become almost notorious for working with James Gunn in recent years. He pops up in little roles in a lot of James Gunn films.
That's a good catch. I forgot
And
that.
Greg Henry, that's where I first became aware of him, was Slither. I loved him in Slither. Him
and Nathan Fillion.
Awful
Right.
mayor.
It looked from the outtakes of that looked like a fun movie to make, man.
Oh yeah, everything about it. So he was the one who stood out to me where I see him and I'm like, I don't trust you.
Right, because that's the whole. I think that's his whole spiel. That he sells it so well. Like, you're being really nice, but there's something behind this. Even when he's like, "Oh, hey, we're buddies. Now we're doing. Now you stand up for me in the acting class and all that." Yeah.
But credit should be given because Greg Henry looks the exact same in 1984 when this movie came out as he does today. Props to you, man. Whatever you're using skin treatments, keep it going. Because I came out, I was like, wait, he's not younger.
So it's bookended by the process of making a horror movie, beginning and the end. There's a little bit of a surreal closure to the movie. Is that the ending to it? Is the ending, it's almost like a very surreal psychological kind of component. You have almost kind of a comedy to it. You have them in the dirt. Of Craig and Melody. So it's like a lot of play of, it's a real horror movie. Is it a horror movie? It's an Alfred Hitchcock's case study. So you have a lot of these ingredients into one big movie.
Yeah, and it's how he uses the structure too, even as you said, bookending the film, having it end, but then having the credits actually giving us a lot of story in one sequence that's kind of, again, like it's sending up the idea, but it's also giving you exactly what you're wanting. You sick person, you get to watch this now.
Yeah, and the end is when they're in the shower and they had to use the bar.
Yep.
All right, cut. Now bring the double in, and there's all the tedious work of just bringing the double in and all that stuff.
But I've never thought about how much work actually goes into matching those shots. So it was actually kind of a learning experience for a person who's never filmed with body doubles before, to be able to see, like, oh, so they actually have to go out of their way and use the little bar and measure everything out. And not all films do it well, but...
No, nowadays, if you find the right camera, you can do a digital line on the camera. But then... Back then, you had to have like a bar set.
Yep.
Like, you can't move your hand. All right.
Yeah, and just the awkwardness of, like, you got to lean up so I can caressed the same way I was. Like,
Yeah, and then complete stranger. Hi, how you doing?
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and grab you there. That's fine. Yeah.
yeah, that whole sequence reminded me of like the only part of Love Actually that I enjoyed, which is the two nude actors that are having a meet
stunt
cute
doubles.
during the sex scene.
Yeah,
It's
Martin Freeman.
It's just
Yeah.
it's funny when you kind of get that whole like you really have to be comfortable with your body to like be in filmmaking, I think, and it's just something where that's why I'm going to be behind the camera.
Yeah. So I like the good choices of camera work in this movie. It's, you know, the shot of the scope and then you point of view shots. I do like the framing of this. Going back and, you know, I've seen this many times before, but actually just to sit down and review it. The camera choices, the long extension from the mall. Not only do you have a great long sequence at the beach, then you have his very vertigo moment with the tunnel, the very much play of the exaggerated villain with his teeth and everything. And then you see the villain and he's not, you understand he's working the satellite, but that's a gag that he's just watching her too. And like, wait, am I a bad person too for doing what you're doing? Or, so
Yeah.
a lot of different variables into one movie that's probably almost a cult classic, almost underground kind of a movie.
Yeah, if any lesser director made this movie, it would be a hot mess.
Yeah.
De Palma seems to hold it together.
Right, because there's so much. There's just so much in there, right?
Yeah, and I think that comes with a director who has a passion for what he's doing, really wants to examine the kind of things that he's looking into and examine the human condition of things. And that's not to say Brian De Palma always hits it out of the park, but like when he finds something and he's able to get all those elements to click right, it's a magical experience.
Yeah, just remember, this is the movie that came just before Untouchables.
Yeah.
So he
They're
sat on
different
this.
films.
Yeah, it's very different films. But I think you have something like this where you get out your exercise of just making film. This I call this is pure filmmaking exercise.
Yeah.
Before you're really doing an astute kind of Untouchables where you kind of have get your stuff, all your bearings together. Here you're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's it.
Let's do our breakdown and review of it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as a staple of Brian De Palma films, I think it's still not one of his best, but I think it's one of those signature movies that you say, oh yeah, it's a Brian De Palma film. But I don't think I would even regard it his best, but it's one of those, like, it's a signature one.
Yeah, like I said early on in the film, it's like it's the most De Palma film that we've talked about thus far.
So if you're a fan of him, obviously you put that in there. But I think if you want to research this, there's a lot of things that you need to clean up.
Yeah, and I've often said what I appreciate most about De Palma is kind of when he actually doesn't write, when he directs somebody else's work. Things like The Untouchables, things like Scarface, things like, I don't know if he wrote Carlito's Way. I don't think he was heavy into that one. When he's really delved into things like Carrie, where he's taken someone else's work and he's added his visual flair to it. I do tend to criticize sometimes with his screenwriting because he seems to want to tackle a lot. And I don't know if his twists and turns always come out the way he plans for them to do.
Like
things
Casualty of War, because
Fatale.
Casualty of War is something that was just, it's something he wanted to do, but everybody's so used to him with the pure making fun of movies, and then you're going to drop down your tone.
Yeah.
And it's going to hard for people to catch on to what you want to do.
Yeah. Whereas in the case of Body Double, I think he mostly hits it out of the park with this movie. I think it's probably one of his best screenplays, and he co-wrote it with Robert J. Averick, who was quoted as saying later on that I was filtering. We were filtering through Hitchcock, and then I was filtering through De Palma, and that's how we ended up with the script we got. So it was a twice
a lot of
filtered story.
Yeah, and I think it's a little too busy, but he's the person that fits the glue together, because you got a soapy, you got psychological thriller, you got like all those things and all the ingredients you can, and it doesn't have a clear direction to it. It's studying a lot of different variables, but it's the process of making a film.
Yeah. I think the only thing for me that doesn't 100% land is that finale, the grave digging scene, just because there's and parts of it I think are absolutely brilliant. It's just the dispatching of our villain that I don't know if I entirely buy, and I'm pretty sure a dog dies in that scene, maybe unnecessarily.
Right. I think the whole process of the journey, you want a big payoff, and then people are like, that's the payoff doesn't.
Yeah, and it might be because we know Greg Henry now. Like, I don't know when I watched the film, I saw the Indian character, and I was like, well, that's Greg Henry. Like, I saw it, and I was like, well, that's obviously. So I don't know if I was supposed to get it that early on, but I did. I think
12-year-old me didn't get it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
So people who don't know Greg Henry probably won't, but people do. It's just like, I'm aware of him now.
It's a little obvious.
And I wish maybe there had been more distinction with that, because again, there's a lot of hints that it's him too, that maybe are overdone because when I see them both in glasses, then I make that connection. Maybe he hadn't been wearing glasses if he hadn't been doing as much. But there's a lot of things where it's like, as I'm putting it together, it's still kind of like, I don't know the how, I don't know the why, I don't know the... Like, there's a lot of questions I still have that are slowly working their way through. I think the film works its best when it breaks structure, though. You know, when it starts with that horror movie opening, which gives you kind of a, okay, I get the tone.
Yeah.
When he gets dreamlike as he's watching across the street, and that score comes in, which is a little cheesy, but it works pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how you record that. You know that.
Well, yeah, and I think it works best with its reprisal later on when he sees Holly body, and then the music comes back in, and that's our connection. Because I was trying to figure out what connection he was actually making there, and then I was like, oh, I see. Okay, like I know where we're going.
Yeah.
The Frankie goes to Hollywood scene, perhaps one of my top 5 scenes in any De Palma film, because it's just this dreamlike, messy, weird thing that doesn't really even fit in the narrative. But as it's happening, I'm like, yeah, keep going. I don't care. Like,
yeah, it's something my friend Andrew Hunt used in Infernal Machine. There's this dream sequence of going into a restaurant. It doesn't really fit part of the story, but it's in there as
splashes.
It splashes in there, and you got color and everything. And I think that's really where Brian works well, is those long sequence shots of multiple action sequences, but he used them Blowout with the mall, here with the mall, at the beach.
Yeah.
Playing with great distances.
Well, yeah, the mall to the beach. Because it's really one sequence. That whole thing just keeps going afterwards. And you're just like, when is it going to end? And not in a boredom way, but like when can the tension go back down? Because it just builds and builds and builds. And De Palma's perfectly fine making you uncomfortable.
Yeah,
he's enjoying making you uncomfortable, and he hopes you're enjoying it too.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And one of the thing is, even when things are staged very obviously in movies, in his movies, you don't know if it's intentional part of the story or he just doesn't care. Because like the trees falling in the street, which is a gag, but is it part of that they intentionally blocked that way for him, or is this something in the movie that happened that's just... You can intentionally look at it, it's like a part of the story, but it's framed almost too obvious for a movie process. But for him, he gets away with it.
Yeah, there are sequences that feel like movie goofs, like you'd see them on IMDb under film mistakes. But then when you watch it a second time, you're like, oh, it was, like his mistakes are really to throw you off guard. They're not mistakes at all. They're perfectly planned, but they feel like mistakes on first watch.
Right. Yeah. Like the leaves falling off the truck, and it's staged so amateurish, still student filmmaking.
Yeah.
But like, is that part of the story? Is somebody intentionally, filming it? But he gets away with it.
Yeah.
Your mind's going so many different things. Then you look off in the distance, you're like, you're not supposed to be paying attention to that. There's a guy with the back there.
Yeah, and even De Palma said one of his least favorite scenes that he's ever directed was the theft of the purse on the beach. He just thought it wasn't well put together. But the thing is, it has this kind of cheap, truncated kind of look to it where it almost catches you off guard and you're like, wait, what the hell is happening? Like, you almost can exclaim that in the middle of the theater. Just get up and go, I'm confused. And then he brings you back into it by coming back around to the claustrophobia, his vertigo. If you
needed something, because we've been through this hard journey, to break up, because they finally meet face to face. And you needed something, and that's probably the only thing I can think of movie logically to get away from just ending that scene and to show going back to his vertigo, where we're like, oh my god, the tunnel and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I really enjoy the way that they come back around to his claustrophobia at the end of the film as well, where it's this like dream logic narrative where he's being buried, and he goes back to that opening scene in his mind, and he gets pulled back out, and they're like, you can't handle it, and he's like, I need to. I need to get in there, Yeah. And so it's kind of that dream logic thing of, it feels like if you didn't have those surreal moments to really kind of give the film that flavor, this film could fall apart. But it's held together so nicely within this tight character narrative.
So overall, I think if you look at the cover, you're like, "Oh, am I getting this romantic thriller? Am I going to do like this body heat thing?" Which is kind of, you almost think like this could be like body heat kind of a movie. Yeah. But no, you're getting a variety of variables inside one movie. Like a soapy love story, you get that Hitchcock thing, you get all these different varieties. A parody of horror movies. He pulls the curtains, the process of making film in the film. So a lot of different things in this movie that kind of give it a hit. Yeah.
Yeah, and the film actually has a remake. that I just learned about. It's an Indian Hindu language remake called Pelanasha from 1993.
Oh my God.
I have not watched it, but I'm curious now to see what an Indian Hindu language version of this film would be.
It would be tough to do a remake of this because it's such pure exercise in fun filmmaking.
You would need to have somebody who is really passionate about this story and someone who's different enough. It's almost like when you enjoy a cover more when it's done by someone out of genre. You know, like Rob Zombie covering, other like genres that aren't hard rock. You kind of think to yourself, okay, like I'd like to see someone just completely unique with a very different take come at this material. I can't think of a single director that I would pick now, but maybe there's one out there.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Thank you for the Patreons for joining.
And let us know down in the comments what you thought about Body Double. I was going to say Body Heat. Body Double.
I gotcha.
It sits next to them on my shelf. And then, let us know which film we should cover next. We got another De Palma film coming up to you next month.
Yeah, I got to pick it.
Yeah, so let us know down below. And if not, we'll pick ourselves, okay? Because we're doing all of them. So thank you, guys. We'll see you.